Hi, and welcome to this video. This video, we're going to be talking about kind of a little heavier topic in how does post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, impact teens and their mental health. That's what we'll be having a conversation about in this video. But one of the things we'll be talking about in this video is what that looks like. What does PTSD look like in terms of behavior? What to be on the lookout for to kind of give you a sense on what might be happening, and also what it's doing to the brain, right? So those two things we'll definitely want to be taking a look at. And PTSD also tends to isolate teens emotionally. We want to have a little discussion on that. And then treatment options. What can be done about it? And how would mindset training go into that treatment kind of process? All those things, that's what we'll be talking about in this video. So two of the things that we would almost expect to see, I think partly because of what we watch in TV and movies, when somebody's suffering from PTSD, this idea of flashbacks, right? So they re-experience an event from uh, this, what's causing, what's triggering the PTSD, and many times they like go right back to it. Like they become in that time. There's one student in particular I know of that would become a little girl again. Like when she was having a flashback, she would show mannerisms of being this 7-year-old girl that was going through suffering this PTSD because of that event when she was 7 years old. So she would begin to act like she was a 7-year-old. That was this idea of the flashback. It could come right in the middle of the school day, right? Something happened that triggered this flashback, and poof, she'd go right back to that time. Well, along with that, or similar to that, you have nightmares, right? We'll see that all the time in movies, right? You see the war veteran who's suffering from PTSD, who wakes up in the cold sweat and had that nightmare. And those are two outwardly behavioral things that we can be on the lookout for. You see those. That would be something that is common with people who are suffering from PTSD. The other is this idea of emotional numbness. And again, we might see that portrayed in movies and all. It's hard for them to connect. They can't open up. They can't communicate. They become emotionally cold, right? They might see something happen to somebody that you would think might evoke even compassion or something emotional trigger in them, and it's just not there. So that idea of emotional numbness is yet another thing that we see. Somebody who's suffering with PTSD, there are some definite signs. Some of the signs we actually would probably go, oh yeah, I've seen that in the movies or something like that, right? And one of those is this idea of flashbacks. So something triggers a memory from the time of this event that's really triggering the PTSD. They go right back to that event. It can happen at any time. I know of a student who this would happen and go right back to being a 7-year-old little girl when this event happened. And you would begin to see mannerisms like sucking the thumb, something that you wouldn't see her doing in high school student doing, and you could tell by just other mannerisms that, oh, she's having a flashback. She's going right back to that time, that moment. Along with that would be the idea of nightmares, right? We see it in the movies where the war veteran wakes up in a cold sweat, reliving that whatever it was he saw, and experience that PTSD. Beyond that, there's this emotional numbness that we often see where people just don't react the way you would expect to something they're witnessing that should draw or elicit an emotion. And instead, there's really nothing. So that's sort of emotional numbness. The last thing is physical distress, right? Oftentimes in teenagers is viewed as inappropriate behavior, right? Somebody who's getting in trouble a lot because they are reacting to what they're feeling inside, and they aren't reacting appropriately. Their behavior is such that is getting them in trouble. Again, if we think of from Hollywood perspective and the old, the military kind of story, they might be getting in fights a lot. They were the barroom, brawl kind of thing where they're just reactive, right? That's another sign of somebody who could be suffering from PTSD. What's going on inside the brain with this? Well, if you think about these flashbacks and these uh, nightmares and things that are happening, is your brain's playing these events over and over. These neurological connections are really beginning to kind of wire in. Now, a teenager, being young as they are and the brain's still developing, as they begin to experience this, if they aren't getting intervention fairly soon, these pathways can really get almost hardwired. Might not be the best terminology, but those paths are really getting laid out and structured strongly because of their age. So it can have long-term impact on their whole emotional development and how they begin to perceive the world and their beliefs, and all of those things can really get impacted long term, because without the intervention, these memories and these flashbacks and these situations and what they might be saying to themselves, all that gets played over and over and over, really kind of wiring in that connection that much stronger. It's true with adults as well, but teenagers, because of their age and their brain development, it makes it that much more important to get intervention as early as possible. So one of the challenges that we face when we work with teens who are experiencing this is their emotional isolation. And by that we mean, if we aren't helping them and listening to them and recognizing that something's going on and getting the intervention going, they can begin to pull away more and more. They don't necessarily know how to show us that they're hurting except through these kind of behaviors and all. And adults, it's kind of up to us to kind of broach that with them. It can be a very challenging thing to do, but it's very important. One, it will help the teenagers themselves begin to be able to trust an adult because they begin to know that they're asking these questions, they're interested. Now, it doesn't mean that as soon as we ask the question, teenagers just going to open up. Of course not. But what it does is it begins to set up that pattern interrupt, right? It's not really what the teenager might be thinking is going to happen. So you begin to break those walls down, those barriers down. You loosen their model of the world. And that's really going to be important for the therapy and all. Let me tell you about these two teenage girls, sisters, a year apart, who, middle school age, were suffering from PTSD because their mother had prostituted them. Horrific situation. All these things we're talking about, we began to see. And, warning signs are there. So we begin to try to get the agencies and all involved. Sadly, sometimes the wheels move too slowly. I wish I could say they didn't always move that slowly, but they do for some good reasons that they do. So I understand that. But what was going on with these teenage girls is as those wheels are moving slowly and we can't really get them out of the house and get them out of that situation, that trauma, that trust, all those things began to kind of exasperate what was happening to them emotionally and their ability to kind of react with their adults who were there to try to help them. And that puts up walls that are going to make the intervention that much more challenging. So what therapies are often used to help teens or anybody with PTSD? One's cognitive behavioral therapy, an excellent kind of therapeutic model for all kinds of things. But another one is eye movement desensitization and reprogramming. I don't think the reprogramming part's exactly right, but EMDR. And it's about repatterning thinking processes through eye movements and stuff. It's a fascinating whole therapeutic process, but it gets great results with PTSD. On top of that, therapists who train in things like timeline therapy and even hypnotherapy or neurolinguistic programming, when you put all those pieces together, the more tools a therapist has in their toolbox, the more effective they can be, because they can begin to reach for something that might work better for that particular client in that particular instance. The bottom line with all of this help and support is we're trying to interrupt patterns of thinking, help them let go of the emotion and the trauma of that, file away what they need to learn from it, rewire some of the what you're holding on to in the body, right? Because a lot of that stress sometimes gets stored in the body. And through all of this, you can begin to heal and let go and move forward and fully recover from PTSD. So it's really important to try to get this early and then find the right people. Even with the coaching that I do and the background I have, somebody had that diagnosis with PTSD, I hand them to a professional who's in business for dealing with that kind of thing, right? While I may have the background or the training, that's not something I do. I hand them off. So it's important to try to find the right person in helping with the therapy. So now in the work I talk about a lot with mindset, if we have had a child develop a real, this mindset of a champion, develop a real strong mindset, and then let's say they get to high school and a traumatic event happens. And once again, I'll use an example of a student who was the lone survivor in a car crash that killed three of their best friends. Right, three of their good friends are out. They've been partying, unfortunately, get in a car crash. Lone survivor. That lone survivor suffering from PTSD. Now, had that lone survivor had the right mindset, training and all, then the recovery process would be much smoother. It would go much easier because some of the beliefs that are there, the habits in place to deal with emotions are already there, established. So when they go to therapy, and yes, they should probably go to therapy in that situation, that whole process can make things so much easier and more effective than had they not had that base of that mindset training, right? So the more of that we can get instilled at a younger age, the better or the more likely recovery from a traumatic event can go smoothly and effectively. All right, that brings us to the end of this important video on an important topic. As always, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, check out our other videos. In particular, you might want to check out the video, How Can Teens Avoid Being Stressed Out? Check that video out today, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.